It's the Full Force Movie News Burst, brought to you by GeneralsJoes with me, Christopher McLeod AKA Diagnostic 80, joining me to discuss the latest comments by LDB regarding the upcoming G.I. Joe Transformers crossover movie is the General himself, Justin Generals Joes Bell. Right then, let's get into it. Lorenzo de Bonaventura has been talking with Collider again, and he had some updates regarding the Transformers G.I. Joe crossover movie. When asked about the future of both franchises following Transformers 1, which is in theatres now, by the way, the Divisive producer had this to say. Well, we're going again. Subject to success, we're going to do a sequel to this, and there will be an animated version, and it will exist completely separately to whatever we do live action. The next live action movie will be a crossover. Where it will be particularly affected is the fact that we now know what these robots are capable of emotionally in a way. So we're going to have to figure out how to create that room that we can afford that and create a story that you can take more advantage of that. So one of the things I'm particularly interested in doing, and we're still in the development phase, so nothing is by any means written in stone, but I do think we need to do more now from the robot point of view in the live action, because that's the only way you're really going to get inside them, Kitty said. I feel like I feel like this is a no-brainer though, Justin. I'm surprised it's taken this long for him to realise that the Transformers need character development. Is that something you sort of agree with? Or, I mean, is LDB a bit late to the party with that point of view?
Yeah, I'd say he's about 40 years late. I mean, they figured this out in 1984 when they did the original animated series. It's almost as if these robots aren't just robots, they're actual kind of characters. That's who they built this entire mythology around, was actual personalities that these, characters have. And I'm glad he's realizing it, but it does seem like it's pretty late. We could have used some of this perspective in 2007 when the Michael Bay verse kind of kicked off. But yeah, I mean, in 1984 they knew this. So, I don't know why we would have approached it from a different perspective, all these years later, but I guess better late than never.
Do you know what makes me laugh about it, right, is the fact that we have had it has to be said, that the character development or the characters in Transformers movies as the Transformers have not been well-rounded, have not been they've either been highly stereotypical and quite offensive at times, or they've been just like sound bites.
Totally.
Like it hasn't really been. I mean, even Optimus Prime. I mean, that was a character assassination if ever I've seen one.
Yeah,
I mean, the amount of films he's in, just like chopping heads off and just basically being an absolute maniac. Not the Optimus Prime that that is also the voice of Cullen, which is coming out of him.
Right.
You're hearing that, and it doesn't match what you're seeing visually or the actions that are being are happening. So I'm glad that it's finally dropped. And two, have you seen Transformers 1 yet, by the way?
I haven't. No, I do want to, but I've heard good things about it. I have not yet seen it though.
Same. I've heard amazing things about it, and one of those things is that it's very emotional, very kind of from the heart kind of thing. So I'm excited to see what that does and how that shapes this live action situation going forwuld. Do you think? Am I being too kind to him, to Lorenzo here, by saying that? Could it be a fact that the reason the Transformers themselves aren't so developed is because of the cost involved in focusing on the CGI Transformers and making them do more, be more? Do you know what I mean? Like, am I being too kind there?
It's a struggle. I mean, you can excuse almost anything for cost reasons, and I see that from a certain perspective.
This show, for example.
Things cost money. That's a fact of life. But I would say that, you could have cut a couple scenes of Devastator's ball swinging back and forth and added some dialogue in there that might have, made up for the effects needed for that particular incident, or Jetfire farting all over the place, or Bumblebee taking a leak on an FBI agent or Sector 7 agent. I mean, stuff costs money, but if anything, I would think the character development, the dialogue, the sort of depth, that would be cheaper, I would think, than leaping across highways and blowing up bridges and cutting people's faces off and all that stuff. I mean, I really don't buy that excuse. I think, yes, Transformers, part of the appeal of the live action Transformers was the spectacle.
Yeah.
But I think you make the spectacle more special if you can surround that spectacle by more, introspective, character-driven moments, which I think they really lost the opportunity to do. They kind of edged a little bit. They started in 2007 when the first Transformers movie came out. They did an okay job balancing sort of the slapstick and the seriousness, and it was a pretty good movie. In 2007, I saw that. Pretty early on, and didn't come out of the theater saying, "Wow, that was trash." I felt like
it was amazing.
That was pretty good. I like that. But they seemed to focus on the wrong elements of that going forward, and kind of really dialed up the slapstick, dialed up the comedy. I think Sam and his goofy parents from the first movie. For some reason, they kind of locked on that and said, "Oh, everybody liked the goofy parents. Well, let's take the goofiness and crank that up to the nth degree."
Usually takes about 6 seasons in a show to get characters that exaggerated, doesn't it? Yeah,
exactly. So they just found the wrong elements, I think, to focus on, and ended up creating a movie franchise that sort of became a parody of itself in a way.
That's so true.
But
true.
I really think they, I don't buy the money issue at all, because they spent a lot of money doing stupid stuff. If they just dialed back the expense on some of the stupid stuff and focused that expense on more character-driven moments, it would have worked a lot better. Or, the Transformers in general, they're replaceable. Almost every movie besides Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, had a completely different cast of characters. You rarely even got Megatron going from movie to movie. There's Megatron, there was Scourge, there was Galvatron, there was all this, so that in itself shows they didn't really focus enough attention on building character, because at any time that you can spin up a sequel and just completely replace the cast and nobody really cares, you failed, because people need to care about those characters, and not. And that goes for humans as well as robots. After the third movie, where they changed all the human characters too. So obviously something isn't sticking there, isn't landing there. If you feel like you can just wipe the slate clean and put a whole new cast in there and nobody's really going to bat an eye, then you didn't do something right. And I don't care if it made billions of dollars in the process. You have to focus on character. That's the first thing you learn as a writer. Not to throw my own background into this too much, but you can write the best plot in the world, but if people don't care about the characters that are moving that plot forward, it's useless. They really have to be invested in what those people are doing, or what those robots are doing, and what the outcome of their struggle is. And that's both external and internal. They should be evolving. Characters should be changing. And you can't really see that character growth when they get, wiped out of one movie and are replaced in a second movie. I kind of think about this a little bit, and I try to look back, what was Bumblebee like in the first Transformers movie compared to what is Bumblebee like now, or Optimus Prime for that matter? They're the same. It's been 7 movies in 14 years, and there's been no character development at all. They are the same cookie cutter characters as they were in 2007.
We got more character development for Bumblebee in the movie Bumblebee than we did across all those Transformers movies, didn't we?
Exactly. Yeah. I applaud him for realizing this now, but it should have been realized a long time ago.
Absolutely. You also mentioned that it was really all about spectacle, but it was about spectacle and testicles, especially when you think of Devastator.
Spesticles.
Spesticles, we'll call it. Now, on the question around the sheer amount of characters that could be involved and making sure they all get their time to develop, De Bonaventura went on to say, instead of them reacting to humans or reacting to the human plot, what is their drive has to be part of that story now. So it's going to be complicated, because now the hardest thing about a lot of franchise movies is how many characters there are. And the more characters you try to manage, the harder it is to make a bunch of really good ones. You kind of got to keep going, keep it smaller. So we'll be in that process for a while, where we'll start with a bunch of Joes and a bunch of Transformers, and I'll say regular humans, and then you're going to do this. That's kind of where we are right now, is trying to put the larger thing in place. The trick in this one, like we were talking about here, is trying to find that tone and balance. Is like, well, how much of the Joes do you want, and how much of the Transformers do you want? I think I know what our answer to that will be, Justin. But what do you make of his comments regarding the characterization here? Does this give you a little hope that we will see more emphasis on developing a smaller group of Joes and bots here?
Yeah, it does, and I think that's the right idea. I mean, you're never going to make everybody happy. I mean, when you're dealing with a cast of hundreds of characters, there's always going to be somebody who goes, "Wait, my favorite character X didn't get included," and not fair.
Downtown isn't in it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you have to pick and choose who you want to feature, and that's just a fact of life with these films, and you can do it, I think, in a way that isn't like Retaliation, where you kill everybody else off and just restrict it that way. You can find ways to focus on characters, but I think as long as the film is done well, I don't think people are going to complain that you only focused on a small handful of characters. I mean, you're never going to really you're in live action, you're not going to sit in a theater and see a cast of 200 GI Joe characters all at once. That's not going to happen unless the franchise explodes in popularity and we end up some kind of battle scene like an Avengers Endgame where everybody's on the table. I mean, that was a very unique situation. That's not a barometer for what we might see.
The equivalent, what would the equivalent be? Cobra Civil War, perhaps?
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
So everyone hitting Cobra Island up at once and all like a big battle. Actually, do you know what? That would be pretty dope for the Avengers Endgame equivalent.
It would. It would. And I think, I hate to say the potential is there. You really have to think about what you're doing, and I don't have a lot of I mean, Lorenzo Bonaventura has not given us a reason to give him the benefit of the doubt. So I don't have a whole lot of optimism, but I think if done the right way, I don't know if we'll ever see dozens or hundreds of GI Joe characters, but this could be the opportunity to walk into a universe that might allow us to see a couple dozen on the screen at once. And yeah, you're going to have to accept the fact that it's going to be Duke, it's going to be Snake Eyes, it's going to be Roadblock, Storm Shadow, it's going to be hopefully Zartan. It's gonna be the characters we all feel like have been.
It's gonna be Chipang. It's gonna be Flak Vipers.
Yeah,
Heat Vipers. I mean, what the obvious ones,
Mole
right?
Rats. Yeah, guys like that.
It's actually more likely
probably
we see Mole Rats
at this,
at this rate.
But yeah, I mean, it's just, and I know a lot of conversations happen around Chuckles. That being a possibility. But yeah, I mean, you're just going to have to accept the fact that it's going to be a small group of characters. Accept that now. Accept the fact that your favorite character is probably not going to be in it. But I think if you look back throughout some of the best GI Joe comic stories over the last several years, I know the Cobra comic series from IDW was really, really popular and done very, very well, and featured a very small cast of characters. There was only it was Chuckles, Chameleon, Jinx, the twins, a couple others swirling around there, but you can tell quality stories with small groups, and I think that's what they have to do. I think if they get too obsessed with drawing in all these extra things, they're going to lose some of that. And I've expressed this before, but I'm a little afraid they might have already missed the boat a little bit. I think introducing GI Joe as a crossover with Transformers doesn't necessarily give GI Joe time to breathe on its own. I'll take what I can get at this point. We may not be able to see a solo movie without Transformers being involved, so I'd rather have that than nothing. But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. But yeah, we've just got to get used to the fact that we're not going to see all of our favorite characters. It's going to be very small groups.
I would say doing it as a crossover gives us the opportunity to see more sequels from both sides of the brands here, and I think that it does probably bode fairly well for getting more GI Joe movies following it. And I would say, wouldn't it be great if they just went into it with GI Joe being in its kind of like growth state, like still a very small operation, adding little bits and pieces to it as they go, rather than just be like, oh, it's this, it comes to the pit and then you go down the thing and there's like millions of people playing in a underwater submarine thing and just stuff like that. It's like that. Let's leave that to the side for now and make it like a bit more mysterious, a bit more spy-like, a bit more, black. Was it the off the books sort of black operations sort of thing? That would be amazing. And obviously Chuckles slides into that like he does in my DMs every now and again as well. But yeah, no, I'm down for that. Are you excited at the fact that this is pretty much happening though? Like, because there's at certain points there could have been that moment where it's like, this is in development and then you never hear of it again, but this is a continued, this is happening next, This is definitely happening next. This is now in development. We're looking at Chris Hemsworth, who's probably on board by all accounts. Like, even if he's not a Joe, he's going to be involved as a Prime. I mean, I can't see them not doing something like that.
Well, didn't he say somewhere in this article that Chris Hemsworth was going to be a human character?
Well, that was actually from the previous story that they were taken from the previous story from that we discussed last time.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, he has talked about, I think it was SDCC, wasn't it? He mentioned that it's kind of up in the air at the moment, but they've discussed the possibility of him playing he doesn't know, but he was, the possibility of doing multiple roles. Yeah. And I think this particular article on Collider did sort of almost make it appear like it was new information, but it's true. That's been known for a while. Yeah. But no, I mean that excites me. The fact that this is like almost certainly definitely happening has certainly got me more confident that it is actually going to actually happen.
Yeah, it does. The latest words from De Bonaventura, I'm going to struggle with his name.
Say LDB. That's LDB, what I do.
Yeah, the words from LDB really have kind of shaken that out. That this isn't an if, it's a when, which is good. I think it's great news. Anytime G.I. Joe is featured theatrically anywhere, no matter what the end result is, it ends up being good for the brand in the long run, typically. So I think there's no reason to think this will be any different. And like you said, I mean, this, if Transformers 1 is successful, which we don't know if it'll be successful yet or not, but we certainly heard some positive buzz about it.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. And I think that really, and like you said, if this crossover film explodes in popularity, that only makes spin-offs more possible and makes it so G.I. Joe might more effectively move into its own separate, cinematic entity, which obviously is something I think we all want to see.
Definitely. That's it then, pretty much, dude. We've covered all of it. We've covered LDB. Gross. Anyway, yes. So Lorenzo de Bonaventura has been talking to Collider very recently, and just in summary, has mentioned that this is happening, and that they're going to be focusing on smaller amounts of characters just to drive home the personality of Transformers. Finally, I think that has been the one thing that's been missing for the longest time, as we've discussed today, just in like just the kind of lack of depth with the Transformers and this thing of what would their drive be. Their drive has always been there. Like that, it's not like a a mystery. Like they need Energon, and the Autobots are good and don't want to destroy other planets, and the Decepticons are bad and do. Yeah. So you end up with this this power struggle turning into a war.
It's almost turned comical throughout the movies too, that every single movie has some different ancient MacGuffin device that they all of a sudden have to search for that nobody knew about previously. and I really hope they kind of try to find a different motivation besides this mysterious artifact that all of a sudden is the key to saving or causing the world's end.
Cybertronian stick.
Yeah.
We need this to insert into our USB ports. I can't even think what. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, you've had what the blimmin' the cube. I forget what it's called now. The spark.
The Allspark. Yeah.
The Allspark. We've had the Allspark. Yeah. We've had Energon. We've had, but I mean, Energon's always been there. But we've had sword.
Beast Wars, which was Rise of the Beasts was better than some of the other films, but it still focused around this ancient Aztec artifact that nobody knew about for thousands of years, and all of a sudden everybody seemed to know about it all at once. And I was watching
Unicron into
I was watching that movie again, and it's entertaining, but you definitely struggle a little bit with the Autobots supposedly don't know anything about this artifact. It's been lost or whatever, but the moment it's located, somehow they're all within the 30-mile radius of it. Yeah. And they're within 10 minutes. I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's just, I really hope they do find that drive that goes beyond finding the latest, world-killing device and they really
Cybertron iPhone 18 or something that they're looking for.
I say this every single time, but they need to look at what Skybound is doing and figure out how to translate that to film, because Skybound has so far, and it's a very thin line. Like, we don't see them bleeding over heavily yet, Transformers and G.I. Joe. Yeah. But they have found that middle ground that doesn't take away from G.I. Joe, but also allows them to produce like an Eisner-winning Transformers comic book series, which is just kind of insane, like what they're doing to bring the worlds together. And I think they need to look at that from a cinematic perspective, and they don't, not everything needs to be the end of the world. I think that's something you can say in Hollywood in general. I think every single tentpole action movie these days is, stopping the end of the world, and the stakes don't have to be that big. I mean, you can have equally big stakes for smaller groups at a smaller level. It doesn't have to be, the world is going to implode if you don't do this one thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it just has to be. It's always bigger and bigger and bigger each time, isn't it?
Exactly.
At some point, there's going to be some sort of mega Unicron that's going to be like 3 times the size of him or something.
It doesn't feel earned when every single movie is the world is going to end if we don't do this. Then how do you elevate that to the next degree? I mean, how do you have a first movie that you save the entire planet? Okay, the next movie, the stakes should be higher. Well, how can the stakes get any higher? They can't. So you end up, boxing yourself in, and you end up repeating yourself over and over again, as the Transformers series has done since 2007.
I think it's going to be really fun and interesting to see an origin for Joe here, and it's going to be really cool to see finally the two together on screen, which I think has been like that thing that I think has been missing for. I know a lot of people disagree. I know there's a lot of fans that don't like the mixing of the two. They're either Joe fans or the Transformers fans, or they are both fans of both, and they don't want them to kind of coexist necessarily. I get that. I totally understand it. I think though, if this is done really well, all of that goes out the window. All of that thought process of I don't, want these two combining, and then they combine and it's really good. I think that's the only thing that's been troubling a lot of those people, because there's also been a lot of people that have come over to the Skybound story recently. The Energon universe has been phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
And again, it's sort of like kept simple to a degree. There aren't a lot of complicated strands or things going on, even with all those G.I. Joe's mini series, like Scarlet, Destro. They're all so good on their own merit, and they all weave into this universe without having to like forcefully, stumble across continuity and it's just been really good. And like the Energon universe in general has been phenomenal. So it proof there that G.I. Joe and Transformers together isn't always blooming, chalk and cheese. Sometimes it's peanut butter and jelly. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and it's easier said than done. But sometimes keeping things simple is better. And I think a lot of, and I always point out the MCU as kind of, proof positive of some of this stuff. But, phase 1 through 3 of the MCU was pretty simple and straightforward, introductory films and stuff like that, getting people's feet wet. They started to go into this super complicated multiverse stuff. And, people might argue that the quality kind of suffered for it. They try to get a little bit too nuanced and too intricate and too complicated and too convoluted, and lost some of the magic. So it's not always easy to make something simple. But Skybound has found a way to do it, and they've done it flawlessly. And I think if the filmmakers can capture some of that magic, they could really have a good chance of doing something fun with two of our favorite brands. And listen, in a perfect world, would I prefer G.I. Joe had enough gravitas to stand on its own merit and launch its own film franchise? Sure. I'd rather it be a G.I. Joe solo endeavor. But if leveraging the Transformers, super popular Transformers brand is going to help it get to a place of pop culture relevance, sign me up. I mean, I'll be there opening day. I think that's great.
Absolutely. Well, that's it then for the episode today. Thank you, Justin, for joining me and talking LDB and other miscellaneous. Notice I didn't say his full name this time. That's it for this installment of the Full Force Movie News Burst. Thank you to my awesome co-host, Justin Bell. See you next time. And as always, after 3, you know what to do. 1, 2, 3.
Full Force!
I did a fart at the end as well. That's it for this installment of the Full Force Movie News Burst. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. See you next time, and as always, Full Force. Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on X, formerly Twitter, @TheFullForce, liking the Facebook page, facebook.com/TheFullForce. We've also added a brand new Instagram, so check us out there as well @The Full Force Podcast, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on any of those platforms with feedback and questions. We also have a Patreon page, so if you want to show your support for the show, see your name up in lights on these videos, or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/The Full Force Podcast, or click on the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force.